Yo, I wanted to make a project which looked like this. So I have a slab of wood which looks like this, and I wanted to mill off like an inch and leave, a snake exposed so that it looks like the snake is swimming through the wood. Thanks to this STL, which I found online, it's really common STL, so you can go on a lot of file sharing platforms and find that. So the whole point is I want to make this video so I never have to remember how I did this ever again. Did it in VCarve Pro. The advantage is once it's done, or rather once you know how to do it, it's really quick. The downer is it took hours to find out what the right buttons were. So the whole point of this video is so that I never go through that again. Right, so does this work? Yeah, great. You might have to zoom in on some of this, but the very first procedure is to whack in the job setup. I can tell you that the size of my stock, which is gone, where is it? Um, this guy is 1160 in the y-axis, 400 across the width, that's the x-axis, and 40 mil thick. So I'm just reflecting those numbers here. It's on the Z0 position, it defaults to the top, but our first operation is going to be taking a lot of wood off the top surface to expose the snake, and then it'll be refined with a finer tool to reveal the snake in more detail. And because we've taken that top surface off, when we come to tool changing, we won't have anything to reference off anymore. So it's really important to reference off the bottom of the stock, which won't be changing. It defaults as well to bottom left, but as you can see with my piece of wood, I'm going to have a more accurate bottom right here, just to pull off. And that's it. Our stock's now set up. Now, I'm going to be dragging the snake in here in a minute, but as you can see, my piece of wood is like super regular, right? So what I need to do actually is to um, draw around draw around this piece of wood, create a PNG, and then drag it into VCarve. So that's, you can see the checkered background means that I've traced it, or rather removed the background, and now I'm going to drag this image into here, and that's really now going to be very helpful because I can, if it lets me move it, I can position it over here. And when I do come to bring in the snake in, I don't have to mess around with like, oh, is it in the middle? Is it on the right? Especially with this huge kind of void over here, making it look balanced and that is really important. And it's um, quite an intense process placing it because you're about to commit to a day's worth of CNCing, so you really want to know that it's in the right place. When taking the photo, I took it from as far back as possible to avoid any kind of error in lensing. Um, and then once this has been imported, we can right click on this and, oh no, we can't. I was going to say we can change the appearance, but that might come later. Why can't I do that? Oh, because it wasn't selected. And now this is basically changing the transparency or whatever that's supposed to be. I don't fully know. Um, but bringing it back to something in the middle is quite useful. Now this is just going to linger in the background, and then the next thing I'm going to do is bring in the STL of the snake. By the way, one thing I didn't mention is it was super easy to size this because I'd already measured the maximum limits and set that in the stock. So I was just dragging it to the extent of what was shown as the stock. And that will give me a rough idea. Right, now we're going to get the 3D um, STL in, which I've already prepared. And I'm just going to just double click that actually. Um, this, I think this red boundary means it's a stock. So you can see that this is um, my little blue model in the middle there is what the actual STL is. So I'm going to make this about in the Y direction, approximately 800. and apply that. And I'm also then going to center it in the middle of the model. And then that's about it. There's things that I want to do for this. I want to get rid of this here, but usefully that's below the top surface, so we'll see how that'll disappear in the middle in a minute. But if you wanted to mess around with the position of the STL, then now's the time. Right, this was very, very confusing for me. I thought on this dialog, I would now be positioning the height of the model. It's not, that's not what this dialog does at all. And you would think that this red box is the stock, and it might be, but it's irrelevant for the actual position of the model. Position of the model we will come to later. Right now, what this is how to get rid of stuff. So if we tilt back here, just to have a better view, we've got a snake, and I don't want anything below that. I just want the ripples of the water. And usefully, this tag, I think it's a tag, it's just saying where the model came from, is just below the surface. So if we get rid of everything at the surface and below that, then we'll have a clean STL to work with. So to do that, I can move the model up and down. You see this black line here? This is basically anything below that. If I have this box checked, discard data below zero plane, then that means it'll throw away anything below that. So I just want to use that as like a knife. Zoom right in. Try to get as much detail as I can. And I might have to override the slider. Try and tweak that. Oh, too much. Yeah, and now I'm going to import that. And now we can see a model. Right, you can't really see where the STL is in relation to the stock anymore. Which again, very confusing. But it doesn't really matter, because at this point we'll get to that later. The first thing we want to do now is check that the position on the stock is good. So thanks to our PNG, I can now make sure that it is going to sit in the right place. Click it enough times. Now I'm going to say I want it a bit bigger than that. I want to move it around. If I hold Control or Shift, Shift is good because it stops it snapping to things. If you do Control and move, whoop, come on. Right, you end up with two. So yeah, don't hit Control. Right, I'm okay with that. I think I might nudge it to the right a little bit. You can use the arrow keys for fine adjustments. Okay, now let's have a look at that component again. I instinctively want to be able to edit that component again. So over here on the left tab is components, and I can double click on snake. And it's useful here because it's telling me how high it is. Now, the shape height is saying that it's nearly 20 millimeters. I don't really like that because my stock is 40. So if I mill the height of that off, I'm only going to have like 20 mil left of wood. I want a bit more than that. So I'm going to say that's going to be 16. Enter that. Ignore base height. And if just to make sure that has saved it. Yeah, it has. Okay, so close. So 16 high. And I'm happy with the position. Obviously, by making it thinner, we'll have squished it a little bit. So let's have a quick look at that. Still looks like a snake. Happy with that. All right. So we've got X and Y sorted out. We've got the thickness sorted out. Now, what we have to do is position it in the stock. And there's a really handy button for that, which took me ages to find. And it is this button here, which is set, which weirdly repeats a lot of the stuff we'd already told it from this button here. Seems to do identical work, but it's also got a few extra bits in there. There's that machine bed reference. And the few extra bits are absolutely critical. So model position in material here actually tells you how high up that model is going to live in the stock, right? Yeah, you can see the display update there, but it just wasn't really clear to me. Actually, maybe if it's... Oh, okay. All right, well, I feel a bit stupid now because that's fine. Don't know whether that was there before. Maybe it wasn't. Whatever. Anyway, point is, that's how you do it. Um, with this button, very useful. So I want a gap above the model of just 1 millimeter, and that's really to make sure that I don't have any bald spots if there's anything very close to the top and it's not exactly 40 mil, maybe if it was a bit thinner. So there's my 1 mil gap. Here's our model thickness, which is reflecting at 16 millimeters, which we'd set earlier, and it's confirming that there's a gap below the model of 23 mil. So this thickness below here, 23 mil, that's great. I'm okay with that. Don't really care about the clearance above the model or the plunge heights, etc. yet. And that is that. So our model position is set. Now, usually the stock just disappears there. Again, this is why I get confused. So, but we've gone through and we've done the set, so we're good. The very first job we're going to want to do is to rough out all the material down to this plane here where the snake sits. And then as it's roughing anything over that, right? And we don't want to do anything detailed. This is about getting rid of as much material as possible to save time. So I'm going to click on roughing toolpath. But before I click on roughing toolpath, I'm going to click on the model. And that makes a massive, massive difference, I find, to whether it works or not. So now I can click on this. A roughing pass wants to go from the extent of the material and around the model, so it's using the material boundary. Machining allowance, I'm just going to put a 0, and then there's a couple of different options here. We can either do Z level or 3D raster. You can play with those, but I found 3D raster to be, I don't know, more. You can kind of see what's going on a lot more. So I'm just going to run with that to start with and calculate this. Oh, no, I'm going to go back. Double clicking on this will edit and select a sensible tool. The sensible depth on this should have been 6 mil down. It's a single flute. I can check all my parameters here. It will horse through that. Because it's really doing a hell of a lot of work, I'm making the step over much more 90% would be great. Just because, or maybe call it 80%, or whatever that is. And then apply that, recalculate. It's going to give us a much more sensible rough. Have a look on the front. Now I can see the blue tool paths are all coming down to the right in 3 stages, and they're skipping over the snake. So that's our first operation done. And if I want to do that, then I'll see what that looks like. There he is, we can see Snakey coming along. It's bumpy as hell, right? So what I then want to do is using my same tool. And by the way, I could probably use different tools. I'm using 6 because that's the biggest collet I've got at the moment, which is ridiculous. But that's just the way it is at the moment. So I'm then going to do, like my final, by the way, will be a very, very thin VCarve bit. And it's so tiny. These big steps, I expect, might actually damage the bit. So I want to take all those big steps off. And so what I'm going to do is do now a finishing pass on just the 3D contour. So I'm going to now move to finishing, and I'm going to use the same tool, which is my 6 mil. Um, Same tool, but I'm going to mess with the step over so it's just much, like it's able to move into smaller parts. Um, and just use that to nudge in, uh, like take as much off as it can before I crack out my tapered screw or cutter. So I'm making absolutely sure that they're all correct, as in it's just that tool. We're now on model boundary, and the offset is interesting. We'll make that at 0. We'll come back to that later on the tooltip. Um, and then raster again. Calculate. Now you can see that all those toolpaths are going over snaky and hopefully knocking out any big chunks. So let's have a quick look at that. Hopefully some of those chunks are going to come down. Yeah, see it's de-chunking it. Now there are still some chunks around the outside, so I'm just going to just go into, where was the model boundary? There it is, boundary offset. Going to make that 10, and we'll see what impact that has on the chunks. Might not have anything at this stage. Oh, okay, yeah, it does a little bit. Yeah, that was worth doing. What it's doing is basically it's 10 millimeters away from the edge of our our mesh, and then that's de-chunking quite a lot of stuff. Um, I found that if I didn't do that, you would end up with lots of artifacts left from the roughing pass. So now that's done, we are finally into our another finishing pass, which I'm going to be using my very narrow ball nose taper cutter. Taper ball nose cutter. It's got an included angle of 5.5. No, sorry, side angle of 5.5. So included is 11. Tiny tip radius, 0.5 of a mil, and it's got 3 flutes. So I'm going to select this guy, and not a lot else is changing here. Model boundary again, just going over the snake. Boundary offset's 10. The details all set here. Oh, gotta remove that. And by the way, I had previously loaded both of them at the same time, and what I found was that it kind of missed out. It really didn't do the job. It kind of missed out large areas where there just seemed to be lots and lots of chunks. So then I ended up with 2 separate finishing machine paths, finished machining tool paths. So, so there. There was offset or raster. So let's have a look at the difference. Offset actually follows kind of this contour line, following around the sides, whereas and we can. I'm not going to do the preview, but I'm going to just check the time on that. So that would have been 4 hours 40. If we change that to raster, that's worth doing because you're into hours now. Then that would have been really similar. Anyway, point is, let's have a look at did it make any difference. Preview the visible toolpath. This should now hugely smooth up the finished article. And yeah, you can see that the little knobs really coming out now. Okay, and then finally, I haven't done this yet, but I really wanted to. I was a bit zealous of my cleanup pass when I first did it, and I ended up with quite a lot of artifacts on this zigzag. Sorry, on the flat area because my step over was huge. You know, you saw that 80% there. So what I then wanted to do was run a cleanup pass on just the flat area, with a bigger cutter. And to do that, I basically did a pocket around here all the way up to the edge of the mesh. And so I'll just try and see if I can remember how I did that now. So I'm going to go into 2D view. I will click on the snake, and then I'll click on this button here, which is create a vector boundary around the selected components. You didn't probably see that, but there was a line that's just appeared. I'll come back to that in a second, and I'll just draw on a quick square, rectangle rather, which is now present as well, so that we can use that as a boundary. Don't know why I did that. And then you can see that little black line as well. So clicking on both of them, and now I'm going to go to pocket. I'll use my end mill, but this time I'll pick up a sensible step over. So step over of, yeah, 40% is pretty standard, isn't it? So there's a 2 mil. Now if I calculate that, what I should see is a bunch of tools. Sorry, a bunch of, whoa, yeah, a tool path that is just going back over and clearing up all the flat bit. I think that's it. I can't think of any other notes. If there are any other things, then I guess still part of the problem solving exercise. Oh, the one thing that I should have been a lot more diligent on is when I was probing between um, tool changes, as you can imagine, the depth accuracy when all those 3D contouring things, one of them blend with the flat sections. If there's any error between the Z zeros when probing, then you're into a lot more sanding. So in retrospect, I should have had a very specific position at which I was going to be using the probe plate, and also whereabouts the tool lands on exactly the probe plate. So if I'd measured the coordinates or made a note of the coordinates when I was probing, that might have helped me a bit. Other than that, I can't think of anything else, and that'll probably save me about a day. And if anybody else watches this, maybe it'll save you a day. 20 minutes. Cool. Bye.